Good morning, writers. I am so excited to work with you some more today on your persuasive writing. And I know you've all come up with some great ideas on how you can change your distance learning and make it even better and more positive of an experience. Now, before we get started, I want us to all be aware of something. And that is, this is very important, give me your eyes, your ears, and your heart. The important thing is, sometimes when you're doing persuasive writing, and if you really, really want something to change, and you do a great brainstorm, and you write awesome reasons, and you work really hard on it, guess what? Sometimes the change still doesn't happen. And yes, that can be a bummer, but it doesn't mean that you didn't make a wonderful persuasive case for what you want to change, and it doesn't mean that it will never change. Sometimes the change that we want to happen isn't realistic, which means it's not something that can happen right now exactly in the way that we want it or when we want it. So I want everybody to agree that even if the change they want doesn't happen, they're going to be okay with that. So I want us to all agree. Say, I will be okay with, repeat after me, I will be okay with my change happening, or not happening, or not happening. Okay, good. Now that we are all on the same page, get it? I'm going to tell you what our next step is. Now, KOL has already done a little bit of persuasive writing practice, and what we did was we turned our change-making brainstorm into a petition. And a petition is a great way to try to change people's minds about something that you really care deeply about. Another great way, though, is writing a letter. And when you write a letter when you want to change something, usually you're writing it to someone who could help you make that change. It could be a parent or a caregiver or a sibling. Maybe some of you even have big things you want to change. And if you're not sure who you can write your letter to, you can also say, "Dear world." So for example, if you just want everyone to be kinder to each other, you could say, "Dear world." But I have a feeling that most of you will be writing things to your parents or your caregivers. I don't live with my mom and dad right now, but I used to when I was your age. And I have a feeling that most of you are living with your parents right now. So I'm going to address my letter, which means write it to my mom and my dad. So I looked over my brainstorm, I reminded myself of what I wanted to change. And in my case, in Miss McCracken's case, it's turning our living room into a movement break room, which I thought was a great idea because movement is so important when you're doing your distance learning to keep your body active and your mind fresh and focused. So I'm going to write my letter to Dear Mom and Dad. So once I've written that, Dear Mom and Dad, and I chose to write lines like this on my paper, but you can write them in any way you want. You can write in your journal. You don't even have to write on lines if you don't want to. I think the lines make it easier to read. But I chose to write lines, and I wrote, Dear Mom and Dad. Now, you might notice that I've highlighted the dear in my letter, and that's because no matter what different things you want to change, I want to make sure that everybody has a dear to start off their letter. So you might not write Dear Mom and Dad. You might write Dear your sibling's name or something like that. But either way, you're going to start with dear because when we're writing a letter, that shows that that's who we are talking to. So Dear Mom and Dad, I think the living room should change. I also highlighted I think and should change because those are things I want to make sure that you have in your letters. So remember, similar to our brainstorm yesterday, that this is the thing that's going to be the same across all of your letters. Everyone should have a dear and everyone should have a I think blank should change. Your blank's going to be different, but everyone's going to have an I think and a should change. Now in my letter, I said, I think the living room should change into a movement area. And then you'll notice I get to my next highlighted spot, which is because. So far, the words that everyone's going to have in their letter are dear, I think blank should change, blank, because. And here's the part where you list your 2 reasons you brainstormed yesterday. I wrote, movement gives me energy, and I need a space to move while I'm home working. You might notice another sneaky highlighted word, and you're absolutely correct. I also highlighted and because I want everybody to have two reasons of why they think their change should happen. And a way you can connect two thoughts is using the word and. So I'm going to read over our letter again, and I want you to read along with me. And when you see a highlighted spot, I won't be able to hear if you do this, but I trust you. I want you to go ding, 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 ding. Okay, so whenever you see a highlighted spot, which means we all have to put this in our letters, I want you to give me a big ding, ding, ding. Got it? Okay, let's go. Dear Mom and Dad, I think the living room should change into a movement area because movement gives me energy and I need a space to move while I am home working. Then you might notice my very last highlighted word is down here, which is called the closing in a letter, which is when you tell the person you're writing to who is writing to them. So I put love, Miss Lewin. You don't have to write love if you'd feel more comfortable writing from or sincerely or your daughter, but either way you have to have something here that introduces yourself to the person you're writing to, if that makes sense. I know it sounds a little silly, your parents know who you are, but the thing about writing a letter is that there are certain words that have to go into them. So letters start off with dear, and they always end with a closing like love or from. Let's go over again the highlighted words that I want everyone to have in their letter, even if their letters are all different. So everyone's letter should start with, you got it, dear. And then, I think blank should change blank because blank and blank. Love or from or sincerely, Miss Lewin. Of course, you would not write Miss Lewin. You would write Numi, or you would write Violet, or you would write whatever your name is right there. So I'll show you the letter again. And I think you'll notice with my letter, I've been really careful to add 2 finger spaces in between and to write with my best handwriting, start my sentences off with uppercase letters, and be neat. If you are a person who feels like you would like a challenge, you can also notice that at the beginning of my letter, after the Dear Mom and Dad, I put a, does anyone know what this is called? We haven't really talked about them yet, but this is called a comma, and we'll talk about them more later in kindergarten and in first grade. But when you write a letter, technically after you say Dear blank, Dear Mom and Dad, you add a little comma at the end. And similarly, after your closing of your letter, where you write love or from, you write a comma after that too. I'm going to say commas are your choice right now because we have not learned about commas yet, but if you're a person who wants your letter to look really official, I would recommend adding those commas in. All right, my friends, I hope this was clear. If it's not, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you and get working on your letters. I'm really excited, Changemakers, to see what you come up with. Remember that Hamlin girls can change the world, and one great way to change the world is through persuasive writing and through writing letters.